Hello friends, let's get everything up and running here, hopefully, in just a second. Dun, 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 dun. Now, wide, there we go. There we go. All right, I got one viewer, and his name is Dan Nelson. And let's hope for a few more. All right, what a great day, eh? Able to do painting all day. This is the third or fourth day in a row. Fourth, I get Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where I've painted nearly all day, every day. I mean, this is like, woohoo! Let's go for quarantine, buddy, baby. I'm loving it. Okay, now again, waiting just a second for my. Oh, and we got some noise here, don't we? Hang on, just a second. Let's. It's not too bad. Let's see if it's this one. It wasn't that one. Let's try the other one. There we go. That's part of the noise. And right now it sounds pretty clean. And once again, waiting for my Facebook monitor to start monitoring. There we go. Yahoo! I am up and running. Cooking with gas. I'm loving it. I hate art. I don't know who said that. I'll find out here in a second. But I love it. I love the irony. All right, my name is Dan. Welcome again. Thank you for joining me, David. I'm sorry, David. Now it's even funnier. I don't know who said it. That's hilarious. All right. Daily Art Adventure 869, starting 4 more portraits. Woohoo! 3 more paintings. I want to be clear here. 3 paintings, but one of them is a double portrait. I'll show that to you. Here it is. Here's the one that I'm doing. So 4 more portraits in 3 paintings. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and talk about. No, hang on. Let's not. Let's zoom out. Zoom out. Okay. So I've spent a lot of time in the last several days talking about cheating. You've heard the drill if you watched me at all. All cheating is legal, but you don't want to do it because your skills deteriorate. So you want to cheat as little as possible. So what I do is I cheat late in the process. And as you saw with my last 5 paintings, I mean, if I have to, man, I'll cheat like, to beat the band, so to speak. I will cheat like crazy if I have to get the job done. And tragically, I did have to. I mean, that's a little embarrassing because I'd like to be able to say I can do it. Anyway, I had to cheat on 2 of the 5 paintings. And of the remaining 3, one was a dog, and the restrictions aren't quite as tight for animal portraits. Simply because as human beings, our eyes, our brains are just like supernaturally keyed into human faces. But anyway, I just wanted to, isn't that a cute dog? You got to admit, that is cute. I'm liking that. I can't wait to get that on my website because I only have a couple pet portraits on there right now. I won't show you the rest right now, but so back to the overall subject of cheating. All cheating is legal. You want to do a minimum of it because your skills deteriorate. All right. However, I want to share with you right now 1, 2, 3, 4 cheating techniques that you could very much argue that's not cheating. Of these 4 techniques, I'm willing to say okay, because here's the dividing line, if you will. Anything that you can do, actually I'm going to show you 5. Anything that you can do live, standing in front of a canvas, looking at a live model. Anything you can do in that context is not cheating. With me? So these 5 techniques, if you will, are such mild cheats, quote unquote, that you don't have to have any embarrassment about using them. The first one is, and I'm going to use this here in a little while and demonstrate that. It's the proportional dividers. Okay. By the way, the white here is tape that I've stuck on here just this morning because it was too loose. It was wiggling. So that'll last for a little while. But I'm going to use that I'm going to demonstrate that. The other is a slightly more high-tech and called a proportional divider. Called a proportioner, sorry. This is a proportional divider. This is, somebody made up the name. This is made by the company Accurate, A-C-U-R-I-T, distributed by Jerry's Autorama. And I put a picture of this and a link to the website on my YouTube community page just last week. So that's number 2. Number 3 is this thing that I have invented, quote unquote. Don't get too impressed. I've invented a lot of things. None of them, and I don't mean patented it, I just make up stuff. I engineer stuff a lot. This is a very simple one, but I'm quite surprised in the last week how helpful it is. It's simply a piece of, I'll say, 1/2-inch plexiglass, even though I think that's actually 15/16 or 11/32 or some crazy number like that. I said those off the top of my head. You carpenters are going, what? Anyway, and I just very carefully, I did this a year or two ago, especially for my wedding paintings. I've used it very little at live wedding paintings, but it's in my kit anyway. Plexiglass onto which I think you can see I have etched very carefully very, very fine parallel lines, vertical and horizontal. The reason it's thick plexiglass is so that you can slap it onto a canvas and you still have something to grab a hold of without touching the paint, whereas if it was skinny plexiglass, you'd have a hard time grabbing a hold of it. Does that make sense? The other thing is the edges are still quite sharp. I didn't round them off. That's so when you do slap it on the canvas, there's actually a minimum amount of contact with the canvas. I won't go into the math of that. Just trust me at the moment. And what this does, let me find a photograph here. Let's pretend that this photograph is taped up here perfectly vertical. The fact that so you can make one of these yourself. If you think I should start distributing them, just let me know. It's such a simple thing. Anyway, the fact that there are both vertical and horizontal lines works with our human visual intuition. We can discern very accurately if there's 90-degree angles, we can see vertical. So it lets us line up features. Now this works primarily with a photograph. I suppose theoretically, I've never tried to use it in a live context. I suppose it would work if there was a live model sitting over there, because again, you can see if that's maybe that would work. I'll try that. All right, so that's number 3. All 3 of those are not cheating. 4th one is a plain old-fashioned ruler. Now here's the painting I'm going to work on in just a few minutes. So you can do things like measure, okay, this little girl here is 4 inches tall, but I'm going to convert that to over here to, let's say, I can't read the number, 6 3/4. Okay, so 4 to 6 3/4. Now, most of us can't do that in our head, but if you combine that with one of these, this is one of those things, the next time I do a video, I've done this once, I need to do it again, walking around an art supply store and talking about weird gizmos that you don't know if you're supposed to buy or not. What do people do with that? This would be one of those. So it says here, size of original. I said 4 inches, and the reproduction size, 6 3/4. I lined those two up like that. And it just so happens that I'm blowing up this girl. Sounds violent, doesn't it? I'm blowing up this girl to 170%. But if I just keep this wheel, don't turn it, I can measure every aspect, her head, her width, length of her arms, length of her pants, length of her legs, and this will convert this size to this. So this is essentially, if you don't have one of these or the other proportioner. Okay, that's enough. Now just one more I'm going to show you, and this is a little bit special because this is an unveiling of something that I put together 4, 5, 6 years ago, and have almost never used. A little bit of explanation. Many of you, if you watch some of the serious artists out there, and I'm not getting any chance here. I wanted some of you guys. Thanks for David for his I hate art. Somebody else needs to say, but I love art. But give me a chat so I can make sure that you guys are hearing everything and seeing everything. If you watch one of the atelier people, I'm not going to explain that. Just if you watch the atelier people, they're all standing around with their easels, all the students in a semicircle around a model. Either they're doing a portrait model or they're doing a nude model, but it's serious, very, very serious. And they are measuring very often, like here's the typical. Have you seen this? I'll face you so you can see what I'm doing. Am I in the shot? Yeah. Okay, so I'm close one eye. I hold this at arm's length and I measure things with my brush. I put my thumb, like, let me see, the model's head is that big, and then you use that as measurement, okay? That's not bad, and that's classic. I mean, the guys in the Middle Ages, and gals in the Middle Ages could do that, because it's very simple. And I'm sorry, my here's where my obsessive compulsive personality is irritated by this. First of all, this brush is tapered. That irritates me, because if it would be much better if it was, because that makes it an inexact thing. Believe me, I know how to do this, but here's what is really bad. Here's what those atelier people often don't tell you. So they're standing here like this. Let's say they're doing like this. Here's what they don't tell you. If anything moves, this is a one-eyed kind of thing, okay? But if like one time, if you're measuring your model like this, and lo and behold, 4 minutes later, you turn your legs, your feet, your torso, your chest, your shoulders. So now you're like this. I just moved like half an inch down there. You're screwed. It's all over. Done. Boom. Washed up. Done. All your measurements are completely wrong. Did you catch that? So I believe in this method, but you have to be so doggone OCD, not just obsessive and compulsive like me. You need to be tipping over into, the needle needs to go over into OC disorder for you to get this right, because you need to do a whole bunch of things. It would be good if you put a piece of tape on the floor and made sure that every time you do this, your toes are exactly at the front edge of that tape. You understand? Next, you can't have any turning in your torso whatsoever. It has to be perfectly square to your feet. You can't even go like this. And then, if you go like this, watch. If I go like this one time, and I go like this the next time, you're screwed. Are you following what's going on here? So you need to make sure your elbow is locked every time you're doing this. I'm so glad to be getting this off my chest. Can you tell? Because this is like the most universal. This is what you see them. Did I say serious yet? Yes. Serious. Them serious atelier people. You know them people that spend a whole year with pencil drawing Michelangelo's David's head. You get my drift. Some of you don't, but that's all right. The rest of you. I mean, you have to be so doggone OCD to use this measurement. It just, I mean, if your elbow's almost locked but not quite locked, I mean, just that difference right there is like you're going to have a nose coming out of somebody's forehead. All right. So I've invented a thing that is not quite finished yet, but it alleviates some of that, a lot of it. And it's this thing right here. Now, time will tell if it ever sees the light of day. This is for painting live models. And that's why I haven't used it much, because about the same time that I invented this, I quit going to my weekly. All right, now here's the main thing. See that right there? Boing, 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 boing. Now you can still screw up by having no tension or tension. But with this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which hand you use. Now, it does matter where your feet are. Your feet have to be, you got to put a piece of tape on the floor, or this just, none of this stuff will work, none of it. But let's assume you got tape on the floor, and you can do either hand. The thing is, this needs to make the right note. Bum, 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 bum. Okay? I'm being a little facetious there. And here's the cool thing about it. You can use this side of it or this side of it, but these two sides are perfectly parallel. Not like this dang brush where it's a taper. That matters. Also, this has marks, lines, blue and red, and black, but they're not numbered because there's a dot here. So if you want to, you can say, okay, that's my main. That's where the eyeball is going to go, for instance, and then you can start using this for measurements. Now, why is this thing here? Well, you already know, don't you? See, it's not fastened. It could be, but why is that here? That's important. Why? Because if all you have is this, what's going to happen? It's going to be real easy for you to get slightly off vertical. Do you see? Now, if you guys think I ought to start manufacturing this, then just let me know, okay? I'll talk to Jerry's. Jerry's out of Ram is always saying, Dan, if you ever invent anything, let us know, blah, blah, blah. This is the closest thing I've had. But I think there's 14 people in the world that want one of these. You understand? Anyway, so you make sure that this is, why? Because now your eye will, if you go like this, your brain will instantly pick up, wait, that's not straight. Because again, that matters frightfully. If you go slightly off, you're going to have somebody's eyeball growing out of their cheek. Okay, so anyway, there we go. That was way more than I expected to say about that, but dang, it felt good. So I'm going to put this back over here in its basket where it's been sitting for 5 years, waiting for me to use it. And those are 5 cheats that are not cheats. Those are 5 legal cheats that you can use anywhere, anytime, at your local atelier without getting laughed out of the room. All right, now let's go. Let's start painting, shall we? Hello, Paul Scaturro. Yeah, good. Thank you. You love art more than David. I'm so glad to hear it. And Nathan, Rusty, good to see you, man. Let's see what we get. Good. Barbara loves art. Sounds not too bad. Good. Glad to hear it. How long have I been painting? Pat G says. Well, I've been an artist, quote unquote, in my own mind since I was 4. Because I remember when I went off to kindergarten at age 5, I already fancied myself an artist, and my parents did not discourage that. So I did many years as a freelance illustrator. Did my first oil painting when I was about 45 years old, but that's completely misleading because I was a full-time professional artist doing everything other medium before I started oil. So thanks for asking. That's fun. My dad was a good painter. That's what got me started, really. I was warding off vampires. Back. That's hilarious. All right. Let me show you then. This is acrylic underpainting. Okay, so this is a little bit funny. I put the word out. I'm putting it out to you guys again that I'm offering my coronavirus portrait special. I'm offering to do portraits for $350, which is about 25% of my normal going rate. Now let's be clear, that's per person. All you artists know that, but if there's 2 people in the painting, that's 2 portraits, not 1. All you artists know that. Evidently, non-artists don't know that. And if you watch one of my earlier broadcasts from this morning or this afternoon or yesterday, you'll see the 5 that I've finished. I'm starting 4 more. And it's kind of funny, you get all kinds of stuff. One was a poor quality photograph, but I made it work. One was I had to Frankenstein a bride together from several photographs, take things out, and I made it work. And it was a flash photograph, which is never good. So this one, I said portraits, and my old friend, Ann Cable, sent me this, calling it a portrait. No, listen, I want to make one point to you young artists. Okay, I could get all uppity, huffity. Y'all wouldn't even notice. It's like, you're not that already? All right, knock it off. I could get all say, that's not a portrait, that's a landscape, right? I could get all my tail in a wad and refuse to do something because what's the matter with you people? Don't you know the portrait? I could do that if I want, right? This is a word to young artists. Sometimes artists are too dang sensitive. Or I could just swallow my pride and say, what? Okay. It is kind of a portrait because this is her niece or cousin or something like that. So it's kind of a portrait. It's really a landscape with a person in it. But I'm going to be very careful about doing her face. My point being is, like, don't be an ass. That's a donkey. Don't be an artist donkey. If you don't want the job, if you're too proud, again, we have names for those kind of artists. They're called starving artists. That's right. But heck yeah, I'll do a landscape. So it's certainly not what I had in mind when I offered to do this, but of course I'll do it. Of course I'll do it. And so because my landscapes are all acrylics underneath, I've already got that part done. So this is acrylics plus oil glaze. All that part's done. Now, let's start doing this. And I have decided here that I'm going to model the use, just for a few of you that want to see this, model the use of Paul Scaturo. I love saying your name in the Italian way. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but why not use relative measurements instead? You can indeed, like with a ruler, because sometimes the math gets a little sophisticated. That's all. Or why not do like head heights? Well, believe me, that's what I teach when I teach anatomy, how to draw anatomy. You have to learn how to draw a human being, and so you learn how long are the arms and legs, torso, and so on and so forth and so on. Maybe that's what you're referring to. But this little device right here is real simple, and I've already got it set up. So if I put it's according to which of these holes. Let me show you. Okay, it's hole number 4. So this comes apart. It's 2 separate pieces, and according to where you put the fulcrum, that determines your ratio. Okay, and then it just snaps into place, and there you go. Does that make sense? So I already checked this out, and in this case, my photograph, as this is typical, the photograph is smaller than the painting. So the small end correlates to the photo, the large end to the painting. And if I put this right at the bottom of her foot and this end right at the top of her head, and then be careful not to bump it, then according to this, that's the height of my girl, and that's perfect. So I'm going to do that. And so I'm just going to make a mark here. And by the way, I'm going to make this real simple and real obvious by not even using a brush, but by using a black pencil. This is this Jumbo Jet Black out of Austria, it turns out, distributed by Jerry's Autorama. It works, these pencils play nicely both with acrylics, water, and with oil. All right, so that's the overall height of the girl right there. Then I come in here. Let's do from the top of her head to her waist. Now, either I could do her real waist, which I have to estimate, or I could do her bottom of her shirt. And I'm actually going to do her real waist. So I'm going with more. So there's her waist. Let's do her head. This is pretty small, but I believe it can be done. Here's her head. Yep. Now be careful not to bump it. So all this stuff that I'm doing right now is, you have to be a pretty, again, I keep using the term, but it's obsessive compulsive. You have to be a pretty fussy, particular, accurate kind of personality, or this stuff will just drive you berserk, right? Now I'm going from this is the collar, or top of her collar, and I'm going to go from the top of her collar to the bottom of her shirt. I'm going to make that longer just so I know that's shirt. Now let's do from her waist to the bottom of her culottes. I don't know what kind of clothing these are. I'm terrible at female fashion. I never know what things are called. But anyway, they're kind of long shorts. Now, let's do the length of her arm from shoulder to fingertip, and I'm going to go at an angle like this. Okay, keep the angle from shoulder to fingertip and an angle, okay? I'm going to start making some lines, because if I don't do that here pretty soon, I'm going to... So these lines, I'm just eyeballing. That, for that matter, anytime you have to match an angle, let me show you what I typically do. I love these long handled brushes. They're so good for getting angles right. So again, and it doesn't bother me so much that this is tapered, because it's such a long taper. And here's the... Good, that was plenty close. Do you like that technical terminology? Plenty close. Now let's do the length of her arm that sticks out in front of her belly to the end of her knuckle. Her hand, she's holding some weeds, some sea oats in her hand, so it's about that long. But let's do her belly to the back of her elbow. I feel like I've done enough already that any of you who, if you've never seen one of these used, you've already seen enough that you now get it, right? Okay, let's do from the end of her shirt to the bottom of her shorts, again at an angle like that. End of shirt to bottom of shorts. I know, let's just use this thing right here to get angle of her, that leg. There you go. Now let's do her upper leg or her back leg, the one that she does not have weight on. And again, it's at an angle, so it's something like this. And let's do the angle of that lower leg, her calf, sort of about like that. So I hope that you're seeing, and let's do her, basically her thigh up here. I hope that you're seeing, wow, that really makes this easy. That really speeds up the process. I hope that's what you're feeling. That something's wrong here. Oh, I've got that part of her arm is way over too far. Just to show you that, just to prove to you that this is not foolproof, because a fool like me can really mess it up in spite of all my efforts. All right, let's do from the top of her head to the top of this arm. So whoops, I have to turn around. Top of her head, this is where her arm comes out from her torso, from her belly, sticking out in front of her. She looks like she's about 9 or 10-year-old girl. Here's the width of her arm. Not that some of this stuff I could do. I mean, I've got enough lines here already, I think, that I could do a pretty good drawing just without any more looking, so to speak, without any more measuring. But I'm going to measure a little bit more anyway. Let's see, what else might, oh, the width of her head. Let's do that. Let's do the width of her head, first of all, with her hair. So that's how wide her head is. Now let's do the width of her face inside her hair. Oh, I got some noise happening, don't I? Hang on just a second. Let's do this, see if it gets better. There we go. Isn't that strange? So it's clear, clean and clear for a while, and then noisy for a while. I mean, noisy after a while. All right, so that's, again, and this, in my opinion, this would be considered minimal cheating. Whoops. Now I'm going to have to draw. I'm sort of on my own now. Right? So as I said, you can cheat all you want. There's always going to come a time when the cheating is done, and then you have to draw by eye. And that's why no matter how much you cheat, you want to not make this your everyday practice, because your skills deteriorate. The more you cheat, the better you get at cheating, the worse you get at drawing in, if you will, the old-fashioned way. Whoops. And there's still plenty of room to screw up. There really is. And back in the day when I was a full-time illustrator and I cheated, traced and projected all the time. I don't mean literally all the time, but, you know, in the colloquial sense of the word, all the time. And I already had a ready defense for anybody that said, hey, that's cheating. I could hand them a pencil and say, okay, here, you do it. Because for this very reason, because there's always plenty of room for screw up, plenty of skill required to take it from that point. But there you go. That's a very mild cheat. Again, you can get away with that at, you know, at the local atelier, probably. Before I leave this painting, I'll move on to another one in a minute, but I just want to demonstrate something else for you. I teach this often. Anytime you're doing a seascape or a lake, a large body of water, don't even, trust me, don't even try to get that horizon by eyeball. I might be exaggerating here. And I've already done this, but I just want to show you. You could do the same thing with a triangle, of course, but just use a T-square or a triangle. So you don't have, because that could be off just a half of 1%, and everybody will go crazy because our eyes will see that mistake. All right, I'm going to put this paint, not so much for cheating, on that painting. I'm going to put that down. I can't wait to come back to it. That'll be fun. But let's do a different one. Now this one, I actually started last night. Whoops, I need to move my easel down a little bit, so bear with me just a minute while I bring this down. So the other three portraits that I'm doing are all for the same person. This is my good friend Wright. I don't know if you're watching right now. Probably not. He's working. Well, I don't know if he's working or not. Anyway. This is Wright, and I'm going to do him and his parents. So thanks, Wright, for the work. This is him when he's in high school, and he's not in high school anymore. But evidently it's a favorite photo of him, his parents' favorite photo of him. In just a second, I'll show you the photograph. Here it is. So it's a vertical portrait, and here's the sketch. And my response was pretty typical. I did this last night, finished at about 10:30, and when I came back up to my studio this morning and saw this portrait, I went, egads! I just make the point so that you know that when you feel that way, when you see it with fresh eyes, that's normal, because I'm seeing it with fresh eyes. So I hope to make some real good corrections here pretty quickly. Now, the question is, should I, I was going to say, should I cheat? Should I start using, you know, well, let's do this just for fun. Let's find out if the proportional divider is even an option. It usually is not, because usually if you start a painting, let's find out if this. Ooh, pretty close. I could probably, let's try another one. Let's try shoulder to shoulder here and see how that looks. Oh, no, not so much. All right. But anyway, I could start using a more sophisticated proportioner, this, but I won't. Here's really what I want to say. Let's just get it out, Dan. Just get it out. What do you really want to say? What I really want to say is, having finished 5 portraits. I started them on Friday and I finished them this morning, which I had really hoped to do faster than that. But when all is said and done, as an artist, we're not being paid for our land speed records, so to speak. We're being paid to, or whatever, rewarded for doing a good job. All right, so I average basically one a day because I started another one last night. All right, but here's again what I want to say just before I get started on this is I'll show you for those of you who missed earlier. Perhaps here's some of my earlier portraits from earlier this week. Well, I actually did 6, didn't I? So there's one. There's one. You can watch me do all these in previous broadcasts. There's another one over there, that size of this boy's brother. And then there's a bride portrait. And then here's my granddaughter. Like, okay, so I actually finished 6 portraits in the last 5 days, 5 working days. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, including, well, no. My granddaughter, I had to cheat. So 3 of them I nailed. Boom! No cheating at all. Nailed it. Got it. Of course, one of them was a dog. So the restrictions aren't quite, what's the word? Tolerances aren't quite as exact with the animal. 2 of them I nailed. Yay. And the dog. Yay. My granddaughter, doggone, I had to cheat. But I pressed through and did it. These 2 boys, I'll show you the other one now. I started out drawing off the top of my head, and I ended up having to cheat like crazy. Dang. The good news is, after cheating, at least, whew, did it. Nailed them. Their grandmother says, and their mother says, looks just like them. Maybe their dad too, I don't remember. And, why is there a speck of something on this guy's cheek? I don't know, but I just got it off. All right. The point I want to make is, by hook or by crook. Some of them I feel really good about, because others like, I really had to gut it out, really had to get fussy. But in the end, 6 portraits that I'm proud of. They'll all be on my website. And now I got 4 more. The point I want to make is, so I'm charged up. It's like, Yahoo! Let's try it again, because hope springs eternal in the artist's press. I just showed you with the girl on the beach. I started that one. Started with a mild cheat. But what I want to do, what I'm really fired up to do is like, all right, come on. Let me at him. Hello, Aslan. Been a long time. Thank you for speaking up. Oh boy, you YouTube people are really chatting up a storm, and I am missing. Hello from Russia, Ashen One. Good to have you on board. Pat G asks, where do you get one of those proportional tools? Okay, you're on YouTube. You're on my YouTube channel if you're watching this. Go to my YouTube channel's community page. Register. That's where people like me can post stuff on YouTube that's not a video. It's on my community page. There's a link there to a description where you can find and order that. Okay, thanks for asking. That's a very good question. Franz says Amazon. Oh, most art supplies. Okay, good. I'm glad to know that, Franz, because I didn't know that there were a bunch out there. I'm glad to know that. Franz says, how many artists, including the legends, are able to draw paint without utilizing some sort of measure or scaling? Is it fair to refer to it as cheating? Okay, Franz, you ask a very good question. Very good, and very, very well put. What percentage? Very small percentage. I already mentioned earlier today or last night, Daniel Green, one of the big dog portrait painters in the last 40 years in America. I watched him do a mistake. I've watched him screw up. I didn't say anything, of course. I get my mouth zipped. But so that was strangely encouraging to me. On the other hand, the old Chinese guys in Manhattan are freaks of nature in their skill. At least the ones I saw 6, 8, 10 years ago whenever I was there. So, not very many can do it without some form of cheating. It's David Hockney wrote a book, about 15 years ago. David Hockney wrote a book, sort of blowing the whistle almost, showing the world that most of the great masters throughout history did in fact cheat. Like Jan van Eyck and, I don't know, Caravaggio? I don't know about that one. There's one exception to that, however, and that is Rembrandt. He did not cheat. Which is part of the reason why I revere Rembrandt. I mean, his skills were just so otherworldly. So is it fair to call it cheating? Well, you got to call it something. And I will call it cheating because it's in contradistinction to, as opposed to doing what I'm trying to do now, which is draw bare naked. Just draw with nothing but looking and drawing. And I would say, no, there are a lot of people that are, of course, first of all, way better than I am at it. And I want to be one of the few who's good at it. And that's why my mantra, as you probably know if you've heard me at all, is do it when you have to, but always keep trying to not do it. I'm going to raise up. This is my friend Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. And right now I'm going to raise up his mouth from what I drew last night because I think my brain is seeing a little bit better right now than it was last night. I'm going to also raise up his nose a little bit. So, Franz, I hope that makes sense to you. That's why I call it cheating, because so as to draw a distinction between that. And I'm going to raise up his eye. Because if you just rely on one of those methods all the time, as I said, your skills deteriorate. And you need those skills no matter how much you cheat, no matter how much you start out cheating. When push comes to shove, at the later stages, you need to be able to draw, so to speak, draw. I remember, this is 30 years ago now, I remember seeing some artwork of one of my fellow, I was an illustrator, full-time illustrator, and I remember seeing the work of an illustrator. He didn't know me, but I looked at his work and it was impressive. Like, whoa, that's good. Whoa, that's good. It was a bunch of figurative stuff, kind of story, storyline, figures, dramatic story, dramatic figures, and he was really good. But then all of a sudden I noticed, wait a minute, something is seriously wrong with that guy's hand. Wait a minute, something's seriously wrong with that guy's ear. So here's what was happening. I was looking at an illustrator's work, and this was 35 years ago or more. And again, I was an illustrator at the time, so I was sensitive to these things. And what I was seeing was that as long as this particular illustrator, who will remain unnamed, of course, as long as he had his photographic reference and as long as he was cheating, he did a bang-up job. So like he took pictures of all these models for his hang on a second, for his illustrations, right? And as long as he had a model for everything, he was good. And he did the illustrations were impressive. But I kept looking and then began little by little seeing more and more and more wrongnesses. Like, that hand's not right, that chin's not right. So, and again, as an illustrator, I knew exactly what was happening because I are one and I recognized the syndrome. This became, if you will, a lesson to me 7 years ago. What showed me is that his typical illustrator, he was so accustomed to cheating, because that's pretty much what you have to do when you're an illustrator, because of the time constraints and the pressures. But he was so accustomed to cheating that, he thought he took, in the photo session, thought he took all the pictures he needed, but turns out, oh, doggone it, I don't have a picture of that guy's hand. Doggone it, that guy's ear's not in the photo. Something's in the way, something, whatever. And when he got off photo, his drawing skills cratered. And that is, as you can tell, 37 years ago, I could still remember this experience. I remember it viscerally. It's not just like, man, it creeped me out. It's like, man, you have to learn how to draw. While I'm on the subject, let me talk about, so how do you learn how to draw? Bear with me just a minute. There are two ways to learn how to draw. One is what you see me doing right now, even though it would be better if this were a live model, but that's all right. Barring a live model, one way to learn how to draw is you look and copy. Look and draw, look and draw, look and draw, look and draw. That's one way to learn. There's another very important. That's learning by observation. You with me? The other, here's the funny part. You can do this all day till the cows come home, and you'll be using like one part of your brain, but there's another whole section of your mental functioning that is laying fallow, and you have to make that part work too. Let me show you. And this is old stuff for you guys who followed me for a while. There are two skills you need to learn. One is skill of observation. The other is you need to learn by rote, R-O-T-E. And these, as you well know, are my favorite books. I talk about them all the time. I've got, in fact, right up here on my shelf. Here, hang on a second. Almost this whole shelf right here. From there, do you see that big yellow one? Anatomy for the Artist. Most of those are anatomy drawing books, and most of these are how to draw or how to do anatomy of some kind. Okay, so there's 20 or 30 books up there about anatomy, and believe me, there's a lot more that I don't own than I do. I've just bought some that I think are pretty good. But these are my favorite. This is from 100 years ago, this is from 80 years ago, and this is from 60 years ago. Okay, so these are old classics, and I'll post these on my community page again. So George Bridgman, Art Student League of New York, 1920s. Classic, classic, classic. You find some good illustrators, art people who are good at drawing people, they'll all know about this book. Likewise, Andrew Loomis. You talk about a freak of nature. I just mentioned him. He's not only is his analysis good, but his draftsmanship is just spectacular. If you want to see some good drawing, just the pure line shading skill of a good draftsman, man, you can't go better. And I have 2 books by him, by the way. Andrew Loomis is his name, and every good portrait, figurative artist out there is just saying a hearty amen right now, because they know what I'm talking about. They know I know what I'm talking about, because we're all talking about the same thing. Andrew Loomis, 1940s. This is drawing the head and hands, and these are outrageously cheap now, by the way, on Amazon. I bought both of these used, and they're some of the best books in the business. Now, the last one is a little bit of a oddball, but I've heard some other really, really, really good illustrators talk about this one. Jack Ham, drawing the head and figure. Jack Ham's forte, which I like to claim is mine as well, is not just drawing, but is giving you all kinds of mnemonic devices, tricks for seeing, tricks for remembering. Here's all kinds of noses. And you can see by all the text in here. Now, just again, I say this all the time, it's not just enough to own one of these books or read one of these books or look at it. If you do that, you get about 5% benefit from this book. But if you actually literally draw everything, I haven't drawn this whole book, but I've drawn bits and pieces quite a bit, several bits and pieces. If you draw every picture, you get about 95% benefit from the book. Anyway, so there are 2 separate skills that you need to develop in order to be good at drawing. Now, what about somebody saying, well, I'm a landscape painter, for goodness sake. I don't want to draw people, let alone naked people. I don't want to draw. I'm not a portrait painter. Aha. And one of my personal up-close heroes was Neil Watson, Dr. Neil Watson. I've talked about him before. A world-class artist that I had the pleasure of knowing about 30 years ago. He was here in Raleigh. He left about 25 years ago. But I had the pleasure of meeting with him in a group context every month for several years. And it was just good. I consider him one of my mentors at that season of my life 30 years ago. And he was if you can't find, unfortunately he died before the internet became big, so you have to really search Neil with an A, N-E-A-L, Neil Watson, Dr. Neil Watson. In fact, he was a foremost hand surgeon in Britain before he moved here, gave it all up and became a full-time artist. What a guy, what a bright guy. Anyway, Neil Watson said, I'm a landscape painter, but he practiced figure drawing because he had to draw. So if you want to become a good drawer, you have to learn figure drawing. This is Dan Nelson at his college professor best or worst, whichever you prefer to see it. This is me at my college professor. Dang it, I don't care what you're drawing. Still lifes, landscapes, seascapes, fantasy, outer spacescapes, doesn't matter. If you want to be a good drawer, you have to do faces and figures. You have to practice, and you do that two ways. One is by observation, look, draw, look, draw, look, draw, look, draw, and the other is by memorizing, rote memory. All right, that was quite the rant, wasn't it? But it was a good one. And thank you, Franz, for bringing up that good question. Yeah, Jake, I am enjoying immensely doing. So why do I do portraits? Dang, because I want to be a good artist. When I'm standing out there on the street doing a cityscape, I don't want to screw up. And if I can get portraits right, I said that I had, every once in a while I do a class where I teach young people for, ongoing period for a semester or two. And I have them doing figures and faces. And I say all the time, again, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, why are we doing faces? And they know after a while. They repeat after me. They get the mantra down. They say, because faces are the hardest thing, and if we can draw faces, we can draw anything. Boom. That's it. Got it? So that's why I'm doing faces. Besides that, I'm getting paid, of course. But more than that, mostly it's just because I want to get better, because I want to be a good artist. It's so great to be 66 years old, and still I consider myself totally on the uphill side of my art career. I'm getting better at a breathtaking rate. Okay, Marcus makes a question and a point. When you do an entire city and you want everything to be scaled perfectly, I always use a grid. Marcus, you bring up a good point. Now, if you always use a grid, then your drawing skills are deteriorating. Now, if you've watched me over the last several months, I've done 3 or 4 paintings. Actually, over the last year, I've done 5 or 6 paintings. First of all, they're large, somewhere between 4 by 6 to 6 by 6 to 6 by 8 foot cityscapes. I use a grid for that. So no shame, huge canvas, lots of detail. I use a grid. But I'm not going to start using grid a lot on my moderate size painting. Why? Because my skills deteriorate. So you try to do it the hard way, and then you bring in a cheat afterwards to correct yourself. So yeah, you got it. Plein air painting. I mean, when you're standing up there, I know when I go on a plein air outing, and there's other artists that are earlier in their journey than me, they're screwing up left, right, and center. They can't draw straight because they can't do this. That's a little harsh, but do you follow me? Why am I learning how to do figures? Why? In fact, I'm not just practicing. I'm teaching a class in this in a couple months, 12 weeks, and I can't wait. And I'm one of the reasons I'm doing it so that I get better at figurative painting. All right, I'm answering all your questions. You guys are really speaking up. I get my art supplies mostly from Jerry's Artorama. Hobby Lobby has good stuff, but not as much of a selection. And of course, Dick Blick has great stuff and a wide selection. But we have a Jerry's Artorama in our town. That's why I use it the most. And they have employed me to do many videos and other things. Franz, right. I agree. Now, James Gurney's a great example. Is he a good renderer? Is he a good drawer? Very good. How did he get good? By employing cheat methods? Nope. He got good by doing what I'm doing here. Then, sometimes you go ahead and use something like a grid. I got it, believe me. The principle is still the same. Radina. Yes, I understand. When all you want to do is paint, I understand that. Yes, art is it a certain amount of mess up? It is, because we're human beings. But no, I want to diminish, I want to mess up on purpose and not accidentally. There is, and I have talked about that over the years. When I'm out painting let's say a cityscape on plein air, I've learned that I habitually make my buildings, I squeeze everything like this and make it taller and skinnier. I now know that that's a good intuition, that buildings actually look better when they're squeezed this way a little bit. So I don't worry about it. But it started as a mistake, and then I discovered it was good intuition. So that's sort of like mess up. Thank you, Barbara. Please you. It's exactly right. I think you do enough by eye to cancel out these very small cheats. Yeah, kind of. Hello, hello, Khalid. Thank you for joining us. I know it's so late there. Sorry about that. Thank you, Franz. Hockney's book, Secret Knowledge. Yes, there's a documentary on it too. He caused quite the stir. A bunch of people really were up in arms against him when he denied his thesis. But if you really follow the documentary and thesis, there's no question. The documentation is beyond question. Yeah, even with a grid, you need to learn how to draw. That's exactly right. Absolutely. There's still lots of drawing after the grid is done. A good artist does everything. Barbara, I agree. Redina. I'm Canadian, so I'm always sorry about everything. All right. No, thank you. Thank you for all your wonderful chats. Let me get back to painting. That was fun. That was crazy. But let's go back to drawing and looking and drawing now. As I said, the hard work of looking and copying, if you will. All right. So I started this. So for me, look at that wiggly hand. Whoa! It's still wiggling. It's still wiggling. And those are interesting marks. We talk about that often. I don't like them so much, so I'm probably going to erase them somewhat. I would like, it's because I think this is a healthy disposition. I would like as many of you as possible to share my enthusiasm, my joy of the struggle. Yeah, that's putting it pretty much what I want to say is, of course I could quote unquote cheat, and of course every time I use the word cheat, I have people say, hey, you shouldn't call it cheating. Well, I have already answered that. So as to make a counter distinction between what I'm doing right now, which is purely observe and draw. That's the skill that everybody needs. And Franz, I'm not sure if it was Franz, but somebody just said a minute ago, that's right. Even after all the cheating, projecting, tracing, gridding, measuring, whatever it is, there's still going to be plenty of need for drawing skill. So that's why, but again, I've already said all that, so I'm not going to repeat it here. But what I would like to encourage people in, and I wish everybody felt this way, is the thrill of, I think that's an appropriate word, the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of the attempt, the grit your teeth, even though in my last 5 portraits, 2 of them I failed to some degree, but 2 of them I knocked it out of the park. Woohoo! So again, hope springs eternal. I'm looking at this figure here in front of me of my good friend Wright, and I'm saying, doggone it, I'm going to get it this time. I'm going to get it right this time. And I'm exercising my brain. I can feel my brain. It's hard work, by the way. One of the hardest forms of mental, I believe, I've heard this somewhere from somebody who has the right to say such thing, as I remember correctly, some scientist-ish person, that it's some of the hardest mental work you can do is look and draw, look and copy. One of the things I did enjoy, I haven't finished Richard Schmid's book. Well, I bought that big expensive book and it's sitting downstairs underneath my reading chair, begging me to read it. And I keep thinking, man, this is a really good book, but I keep not finishing it. That might mean something anyway. But one of the things I did appreciate about him, he did try to literally to describe from the inside of his brain, the art of drawing, what he does. And this was worth noting, in my opinion. He says, my language, my interpretation of what he said, but it goes something like this. He said, when you start drawing an object, and his assumption is that it's complicated, it's multifaceted, and visual things are very complicated. He says, here's what I recommend. Start with a mark that you feel confident about. Find some part of your subject matter that you feel like you understand where it is in the picture plane and the angle of it and so on. Make that mark, bump, and then it basically says, then step by step by step, go out from there. Use that as your first anchor point, and then go up from there, trying to be confident about each mark one step at a time. And I felt like that was a really good description, and to some degree I do that. Sometimes I think about it consciously. I did last night, I think. I mean, it becomes pretty much of a habit now. But when I started drawing my friend Wright, I don't remember, I think it might have been this shoulder mark. Now, in the meantime, it's been moved up a whole half of an inch. And again, that's pretty standard, right? Man, I can't see exactly what's going on here. There's some kind of stripe. It might be the bottom of his leather jacket. There's the edge of his shorts over here. I decided to do Wright's, even though I'm doing portraits for a measly $350. By the way, somebody on, I think it was on YouTube, somebody who's not a regular viewer, they read me the riot act last week. I'm sorry, I'm still laughing at them. They said, that must be the stupidest thing in the world, right when everybody's out of work, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, to each his own, eh? They were fully predicting apocalypse now. They really were thinking this was probably the end of the world as we know it. I'm not quite that, to put it mildly, I'm not quite that pessimistic about our current travails. Could get worse before it gets better. I'm not Pollyanna, but all right. At the moment, I'm pretty happy with that. I can see the young Wright in that rough sketch. Let's do, and as you can see, I began to sketch out his Jeep last night, but I'm going to leave that for now because I'm going to stay true to the title of this broadcast, which is just starting three paintings, 4 portraits. So here's the last one. And it's small. So forgive me, I have to move my easel again. Anybody else asking some real questions? Barbara, you're exactly right. I love the challenge of just trying to draw it. Just try to... Looks like Paul Gauguin. It does. It did. That's so funny because I actually have thought that, not about my portraits per se, but frequently. Which medium was I working in that I thought, oh, I'm kind of like Paul Gauguin or these. Anyway, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. That's funny, yeah. Some Tahiti behind it. Natives in the grass. You guys are great. Hello, Cynthia Bartlett. Good to have you guys watching again. Aslan Mamo. I don't know, Aslan, you were one of my old viewers years ago, weren't you? Then you know that I abandoned Facebook because they kicked me out, right? Did you know that? And I went over to, I've been broadcasting almost every day in the last 3 years on YouTube. That's why I'm up to Daily Art Adventure number 869. That's a lot. marching my way toward 1,000. And just finally, last week, I finally started what I've been wanting to do for a long time, which is broadcast on both YouTube and Facebook. Now, it is not without its problems. Listen to this. I've got 2 cameras, 2 controllers, 2 monitors, 2 sound devices, and a computer playing music in the background. So, and they're all on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so they kind of go like this. And if oh, you didn't see that, did you? Here, sorry. So they kind of go like this. So they get all confused with each other sometimes, and I'm still working out the bugs, but I think it's working at the moment. All right, so this is actually, lo and behold, this is Wright's parents. So I just was doing Wright, the high school kid sitting on the Jeep. He's not in high school anymore. He's in late 30s, I would think. And this is his parents, not too many years ago, Jim and Sally. I know them as well. And I need a place to put this photograph up. So bear with me just a second. I've got a little trick here that I employ. I've got a little vise kind of thing. Clamp, not vise, clamp. It's clamp kind of thing. That's what I meant. Clamp kind of thing. Got a yardstick now. We're getting there, we're getting there. Hang on. So here we go again, and this is exactly what Barbara said just a few minutes ago. I enjoy the thrill. Even if I'm going to screw up, I always am hoping that I won't. Is that fair enough? I'm thinking, this time, come on, this time I'm going to get it right. I'm fired up. This time I'm going to get it right. And I'm going to move my easel just a little bit. How do you like this contraption? I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 devices on that stand. Things have evolved here quite a bit. All right. You know what I might do? I'm thinking out loud here. Well, hello from Russia, indeed, Danya Play. Good to have you on board. Thanks for speaking up. What I was wondering here is, as I've mentioned several times, with this particular tool, you pretty much have to start with this because you unless you just happen to be lucky, you can't retrofit. So I might just, even though I'm not going to use it, I might just try to, let's see if this comes out right. Nope, that's too big. Okay, bear with me just a second. I'm still going to draw without this, but later on, see, so my practice is, and I think if you've followed me at all, you know this, the answer is don't cheat at the beginning, do cheat later on. Oh, that comes out pretty good. That, I think it's a little bit big. Oh boy. Now, I could do this one instead. That's probably what I'm going to have to do. All right, so let's do this side, just Jim's from the top of his head to the bottom of his chin. Whoops. I did the wrong one. Top of his head to the bottom of his chin. And now I can set this anywhere I want. How big do I want Jim's head to be? I'm thinking I want it to be about that big. So that would be my ratio, but I can use that later. This is already out the window, I think. It's not gonna, let me try one more hole. Let's try one more ratio and just see if perhaps, I think this is gonna be too small now, but let's see. Let's do top of his head, this time to the top of his collar. It's a little bit more of a graphic. Well, that's about right. That might work. Let me try her head now. Just her face, top of forehead to bottom of chin, would be this big. That feels a little small. Bear with me just a minute. Let's try this one the way I've got this set up. Top of forehead to bottom of chin. Compare these two. I know I'm pretty boring. Let's compare. Oh wow. That's within a 1/16 of an inch. All right, I'm going to do it. But what I'm going to do then is, even though I want to do this drawing without any mechanical support, I'm going to try to pre-measure so that I can come back later and use the proportional dividers and have the drawing be the right size. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but there's the top of his head to the top of his collar. That's Jim. Here's Sally. Let's do Sally will be top of forehead to bottom of chin. Oh, let me describe for you in a minute another variation of a variation on this any kind of proportional dividers. This is especially helpful if you're doing a face, like up close or head on. You can either in Photoshop, or because this is laminated, I could just take a ruler and draw any. Whoops, sorry, you're not seeing the picture there. Hang on. Here's my reference. With a ruler and a Sharpie marker, you could draw any arbitrary vertical lines. Let's say 2 vertical lines and 2 tic-tac-toe, 2 horizontal lines in the middle-ish of this. Doesn't matter, they can be completely independent of these faces, right? So you just draw those squares. Then in some, like in pencil, like in my case, I would use a watercolor pencil because it washes off. I draw real faint the comparable lines here. Now, let me back up again and explain something. I worked out the dimensions of this print in Photoshop so that it's exactly the same ratio as this 16 by 20 inch canvas. So that's important to understand. Does that make sense? Once you have this tic-tac-toe shape superimposed on the photograph and then drawn on your canvas, that means, of course, at some point later, you're going to have to make sure those lines are disappeared, right? But that gives you not just 4 anchor points where those intersections are. It actually gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, plus where they go off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It gives you 12 anchor points that you can then use calipers like this and to help you plot that. Okay, but does that make sense? I'm not going to do it, but I just wanted to tell you that that's a really good trick. Again, part of my thinking is, if you're going to cheat, doggone it, you might as well learn how to cheat good. Like, here's another one. I've mentioned several times already today. I've mentioned this concept of doing a grid. Now, most of you probably, because you might have learned this grid. Whoops. You might have learned a grid in high school art or even middle school art, right? How to transfer something. But most of you probably, like me, you only learned grid 101. And if you're going to quote unquote cheat, man, at least learn how to do it well. Now that I've done that, okay, now I need to do a quick demo. Sorry, interruption to my interruption. Let's see if I've got some scrap paper over here. Okay, I can do this really quickly, so bear with me. This is worth the price of admission for some of you here. Okay, so most of you learned how to do a grid with a ruler, of course, basically like this, right? And that's the end of it. And then you do a corresponding, typically larger grid on your thing. But now I want to photograph. Let's find somebody's picture. All right, perfect. Here we go. This is in my trash. I've just pulled it out of my trash. So again, if this is your reference, this is how most of you learned how to grid. It's just a simple, like 1-inch squares or something like that. And then over here it's 2-inch squares. Let's just to be simple. Okay, that's gridding 101. And of course, pretend those are all perfectly even and straight with a ruler and so on, measured carefully, right? Here's advanced gridding. Let's say, yeah, but his eyeball, the middle of that, is right, not on one of my lines. But if I take my ruler, again, this is all with a ruler, and I draw a perfect diagonal from there to there, oh, well, you look at that, that accidentally went right through the middle of his pupil. And if, let's just imagine that I do another one like this, bingo. So then and again, it's from intersection to intersection. These are all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? So you could keep straight, keep not lost. That's probably all I need to do, right? You can almost always, with a ruler, you can say, well, if I go from here to here, boom, and it's easy to, then you transfer all these marks as well onto your grid. All right, that's all I'm going to do. I hope that's helpful. I didn't learn that till I was 40-something. When I first time I saw somebody do that, I went, golly, how come nobody ever told me that before? I felt kind of dumb, like I was actually supposed to figure it out by myself, and I didn't. Does that are you with me? But I never did. Never figured that out until somebody pointed it out to me and said, wow, where have I been? I learned how to do a grid, in middle school. A funny story. When I was 12 years old, it's funny, a lot of my art stories go back to me at age 12, because my family moved a couple hundred miles in Michigan from one small town to another small town. But the first small town was near a city, so it was, it wasn't out in the boonies. It was just like under the shadow of a major metropolitan area. But the small town we moved to was not in anybody's shadow. It was way out in the boonies, and I loved it. It was like the most perfect place in the world to be a middle school kid. Are you kidding? Anyway, and I already fancied myself an artist, as I said, because I fancied myself an artist since I went off to kindergarten. And I won a national competition when I was 8 years old. That's another story. Against other 8-year-olds. No, don't give me too much credit, honestly. But it was an encouraging moment in my art career. There's no question about that. Anyway, we moved to this small town, and about the third year we lived there, I think, so I was in 9th grade, the high school band got all new uniforms. And the mascot of this high school was the Stags, because they were the big deer hunting. Of course, up in Michigan, they have real deer, not these little toy deer like they have everywhere else in the United States. These little 120-pound things, These were big deer. Anyway, so a stag was a mighty symbol of strength and valor, Anyway, so they got new high school band uniforms, and the company that they sent us a mock-up, model of their. They sent the school, that is, here's your uniform. How do you like it? And they had a picture of a deer's head, a stag, on the on the front or the back of the marching overlay, And it was terrible. It looked like a dog with horns. Nobody was happy with it. So I don't know if somebody asked me to do this. I honestly can't remember. But I do remember my dad saying, "Here, come here. You draw a deer for the high school band uniform." Not only that, he showed me how to do it. So he showed me the grid method. We rummaged around. This is, of course, 100 years before the internet. So we had to find an image of a deer head that we really liked. We found one. Seemed to me without too much trouble. It seems like it might have been on a feed sack or something, like a burlap bag is my vague memory. Anyway, he showed me how to do a grid. A simple one, not the fancy one I just showed you. And so I did a grid and gave it to the band director, and he sent it into the Lord High official uniform makers, and lo and behold, they used my deer. So that was kind of just funny. Life is funny. It's just being at the right place at the right time, or maybe the wrong place at the wrong time if you think that's not a good idea. But anyway, their high school band mascot was designed by a 14-year-old kid. Me. And we went back, decades and decades later. I went back, and they were still using, at least on the marching banner, they were still using my deer that I drew in 1969. They didn't have the same uniforms. Don't get me wrong, but they were using the same image on the the big banner that goes in front of the marching band. Isn't that funny? Anyway, so I learned how to grid. My dad was a very good artist. For him, it was just a hobby. I have a portrait of him over here. It's not a very good portrait. Oh, it's not here. I took it down. He did when he was like 24 years old. A portrait of himself. He was in the Royal Canadian Air Force Band in Europe. He painted himself on a hunk of wood. Anyway, and he was pretty good. It wasn't a great portrait, but pretty good for a 26-year-old, you know. Anyway, and anybody who's new watching our channel, frankly, these are just the kind of things you have to put up with. Hey, Wright, good, Wright's watching. I was working on you. You probably missed it, didn't you? I already did. Here, I'll pick you up. Where are you? You're around here somewhere. Here you are. I did a little bit of you last night, and then just a little while ago. It already looks a little bit like you. It does, believe me. And I can't wait to get back to it. And this is Wright's parents. I'm glad you're watching. Anyway, if there's anybody watching here that's not a normal part of our community, by normal, I mean, think about it. Some of us, we're on Daily Art Adventure number 869. That means I've done this 868 times, and this is number 8. That's what it means. So we have quite the little cadre of regular viewers, and I'm just making apologies because the story that I just finished about my high school stag's head is the kind of blather you have to put up with if you want to listen to me paint. Some of them have nothing whatsoever to do with art. At least that one, ostensibly, was related to art, right? And what got me on it was talking about gridding, doing a grid. So I designed my high school's band uniform, but don't tell anybody I cheated. I used a grid. And yes, I definitely considered it cheating at age 14. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't make that up. I just did a grid and copied it. I let them ogle in amazement. Doggone, Dan Nelson did that. Oh boy. Okay, hang on a second here. I'm gonna use my calipers here. Now they're calipers all of a sudden. All of a sudden they're calipers. From his point of his chin to halfway around. Well, that's not right. Wait a minute. Forget that. That's not working at all. Because I'm convinced. Here, let me do ratios. Width of his head. From the middle, width of his head, here to here, middle of tie. There we go. That method worked. By the way, I do love these long handled brushes. One of the things that they're really good for is just exactly what you see me doing here. Lets me stand back pretty far from the canvas, so I get a better sense of perspective than if I'm, you know, up on close. I mean, just a little bit. Here's a regular brush, you know. Now, there are some people who hold the brushes way back like this, and that's fine and admirable, but it's not a huge problem, but the problem is all the weight's on out here. Whereas if you want to balance, so you're actually holding the brush in a more fluid manner, you hold it in the middle. So that's why the long brushes are good, because if I hold this in the middle, then I'm as far back as if I... Does that make sense? Anyway, so I really do. These were made, I think it might be a past tense thing, were made by Creative Mark. They might be still available online. Be that as it may, the Rosemary Brush Company manufactures a nice long-handled brush. I've had exactly one of them. The reason is because until recently, I was able to get plenty of these at my local Jerry's Artorama store. But now that they've, I think, bailed on the distribution of these particular brushes, I can understand why they didn't sell very. I'm assuming they discontinued because they didn't sell very many. So evidently I didn't influence enough people. My massive influence in the art world petered out somewhere south of the number needed to maintain the carrying of this brush. Anyway, the Rosemary Brush Company, so just in case you ask, I do really like long brushes. When they discontinued them at Jerry's, I went and bought, you know, they had a 80% off or something like that sale, and yeah, you bet I bought 40 of them or something. I don't remember, 25, 30, 40. I bought a lot. All right. Right? Are you seeing your mom and dad yet? If you are, you got a better imagination than I do. I don't see them at all yet, but I'm not worried about it too much. We're just doing the faintest of measuring marks, really. Using my brush, the long brush again, quite a bit to estimate angles. I find that very helpful. You can almost say that's a cheat, couldn't you? Yeah, but again, my line of demarcation, if you will, what's a cheat and what's not, is can you do it with a live model? And of course, certainly you can do this with a live model. All of a sudden it looks a little more like him, like her. I take rough, like initial drawings, rough sketches, if I can call this that, is quite a bit like doing the first draft in literature. If you're writing poetry or prose or journalism, whatever it may be, if you're writing, it's always the first draft that is the most difficult, because, at least in my unprofessional opinion, I've done a lot of writing over the years, but because after someone does the first draft, then editing is, relatively speaking, easier. And so I treat this drawing process in a similar manner. let's just start slapping things down. We will worry about perfection and all that kind of stuff later. So see, already like, oh, that line's too low. Well, that was dumb. I have no shame. I am not embarrassed about it at all. That's just all part of the business. Now, one of the good things about drawing really quickly at the beginning is I can make a decision, which I'm about to make right now, which is, am I happy with, so I don't have too many minutes invested in this, right? And the question is, am I happy with the general position of the heads on the canvas, the faces and the heads, and am I generally happy with the size of the heads on the canvas? And I'll tell you, I'm already making some slight adjustments because the answer was no, I'm not quite happy. I think the head should be slightly larger. And so it's real easy. It's not a painful thing to make that adjustment because I don't have tons, I don't have an hour and a half invested in the initial sketch. So I'm making Jim's head larger right now. You probably didn't even notice. I just made the circumference larger around and moving his collar down. I'm feeling a little bit better about it. His tie also needs to come down. So there's something to be said for just wing it, just go for it, and don't spend a whole lot of time pre-planning. This is one way to paint. It's not the only way by any means, but it's one way. It's certainly the way I paint my landscapes and my cityscapes, as you well know if you follow me over there. Just start throwing stuff down. You can edit later, and that's a huge learning curve for early journey painters, is because I find that early journey painters often tend to, they throw something down and then they marry it. They drive their flag in the ground, stand up proudly and say, on this hill I will die. And tragically too often they do, because they die on that hill, and it's too bad because there were a bunch of mistakes in it. They should have. So what I'm saying is, don't put your weight down on it. Just put a sketch down, and I say this all the time when I'm doing my landscapes. I'm just saying the same thing here. And again, it's one way to paint. It's not exactly the, having mentioned earlier, it's not exactly the Richard Schmid technique. He says, find one mark and marry it, what's the word? Commit to it. And yeah, that's a good, and he's better than I am. I'm not going to criticize the way he does things, but I'm not going to. Okay, now I see changes. Oh good, his hairline is way too far forward. What was I thinking? And I'm not going to, and it's a little bit too low. And again, I say I'm in jest when I say, what was I thinking? I mean, there is a tiny bit of like, boy, I sure got that one wrong, but it's very tiny. It's what do you expect? I'm just drawing fast. I'd make more than $350 per painting if I did. Go again. That's true. That's funny. Okay, now his ear's getting backed up. By the way, and I mentioned this last week when I started the first set of 5. I'm working here in oils because it in fact is the fastest way to render. It's actually faster than acrylics because you can wipe things off, and it's more precise than with acrylics. The only alternative you have is to paint over it, right? Now, lo and behold, that actually is starting to look a little bit like Mr. Jim. That's amazing. Nice when that happens. Don't worry, I'm not going to let it go to my head. But it actually is looking a little bit like him. It is encouraging when that happens. Okay, this forehead is way off. Again, mild embarrassment, not really. Followed by the pleasure of, woohoo, I just saw something better. Again, editing is better than the first go round, in my opinion. As long as you don't mirror your marks, as long as you don't commit yourself, you don't plant your flag and say, on this hill I will die. No, it's just your first whack. It's just your first guess. So don't take it too seriously. Then I think that, and that actually does look a little bit like Mr. Jim. This does not look at all like Sally. So, but she hasn't gotten as much work as Jim. So let's come over here. First of all, by the way, I'm going to do the Betty Edwards thing here just for a second. Drawing on the right side of the brain. I'm looking at this shape right here, kind of a cartoon horse's foot. Okay, I'm going to render that first, and then go from there and see. Here's a little known fact. Doing a portrait with two people, is it twice as difficult as doing a portrait as one? The answer is no. It is considerably more. I'm not complaining, believe me, but it's doing two portraits. If you want the two portraits, I should specify here. If you're hoping that the two portraits will be in right relationship to each other, like if you want them to be like this and not accidentally like this or this or this or this or this, which I do, then it's actually considerably more difficult than one portrait, because not only do you have to get each of the faces nailed, not only do you have to nail each of the faces with a perfect likeness, if you will, you have to get them the right position in relationship to each other, and even more difficult than that, they have to be in the right ratio to each other. So and believe me, I have learned this the hard way. Whew. So doing portraits with a portrait of two people. I'm not complaining, right? This is good exercise for me. But doing two people is considerably more difficult, because you can do one person, like all my other portraits are one person, and it, like if I end up with a head this big versus this big, it's no big deal, right? But if you have two people, you can't make that mistake, because then they don't look like they belong in the same world. They're not the same size. Does that make sense? So just in case you want to do a portrait, if you want to start out easy, don't do two people. And and it's almost 5 o'clock. I tell you, time does fly when you're having fun, and evidently I have fun when I paint, because time really does fly. I'm looking at her top lip now. Let's get the right distance from her nose. That's a guess. That's all it is a guess. That can't be right. Egads. Now that, I gotta admit, that one is a little embarrassing. That right there. I'm not embarrassed because you guys are watching. I'd be embarrassed if I was all by myself. I'd be humiliations galore. As I think that's a quote from The Princess Bride, isn't it? That scene where not Robin, where the guy, what's his name? Is lying on the bed, almost paralyzed, and Humperdinck comes in. Humiliations galore. I am such an intellectual, truly. Princess Bride was recorded. I reported it's my favorite movie for many years, and it's still really high on the list. I guess I'm one of the cult followers, if you will. Let's try something different here. I'm going to pick up a short bristle brush, dip it in Gamsol, and so I can do some more careful lifting out over here. Now you understand, don't you, that all I'm doing over here, really all I'm doing is the most rudimentary third grader-ish outlining. And outlining is not the same as rendering. And sometimes there are things that when you're doing an outline, you don't achieve a likeness because sometimes there are things that are just too subtle to fit into this. I'm not saying that I'm nailing it here by any means, but sometimes you just keep that in mind. Don't be careful of the outline thing because it can only give you so much information, and many times you're not going to get a likeness because until you start doing some kind of shading. But I'm going to keep outlining. In spite of what I just said, I'm going to keep outlining. It is a mess. The brush method did not work very well. But I'm going to try it again anyway. Still not working very well. Oh. Okay, if I really do get to the point, where I'm going, then it might be time for a break. Do you understand? Leave it alone for a little. I'm definitely past my 20 minutes. My portrait blindness is setting in big time. So, which means my general efficiency here is diminished considerably, and I should seriously consider setting this aside and whoops. Hang on. Now I fear I might have committed the other unpardonable sin, which is yeah, look, doggone it. Her head's bigger than his. So perfect. I didn't do that on purpose, I promise. Let's go back and find my dimensions, my ratio here. Here's top of his head to the top of his collar. Let's see how close I am. Whoops, I'm way off. So we're not in that ratio anymore. Let's go then to this tool, top of his head to top of his collar. Okay, now top of forehead to bottom of her chin. Let's see how close I am. Oh, not as far off as I thought. Quarter inch maybe. Okay, well, that's helpful. Like the top of her forehead should be about there. I come down, I come down. Sorry, I'm in the middle of drawing cartoon characters. She got this massive chin. Don't worry, right? I'm gonna. Wright's not worried. He's an artist. He knows about this hunt and peck. This just keep messing with it till you get it right. Okay. I am about to put this painting aside for the exact reason that I just mentioned, that portrait blindness is creeping up, and I'm seeing it less and less objectively because I've been staring at it too long. So the solution is I set this aside. I'm going to just, some of these lines, I don't want them quite so well defined when I come back, especially over here on Sally. So when I come back, it's a little bit more, somehow I seem to have a fair start at Jim, so I'll leave him the way it is. But I'm going to end this broadcast. I have been droning on, for goodness knows, way too long. Does this guy ever know when to quit? No, that's part of the shtick here. Are you kidding? He drones on for hours and hours with nobody watching. Oh boy. Oh, it's a lot worse than you think, believe me, because I have this little monitor. By the way, see this monitor here? I want you to know. Can you see it? Was I in the picture? That's while we're droning on and talking about silly things. Okay, do you see this monitor right here? By the way, I want all you young people to know that it's very uncool to have it pointing up. It's supposed to go like this. First of all, I want you to know that. But secondly, I want you to know it doesn't fit my ear that way. And it turns out not everybody's ears is the same shape. This fits. All right. That leads me to this next thing, which is, you think it's painful for you to watch this video. Listen to this. I have to listen to everything that I say about 3 seconds after I say it. So you want to talk about painful. I not only have to listen to this drivel, I have to listen to it when I say it, and I have to hear myself say it 3 seconds later. So thank your lucky stars that you're not me. I think having to hear every stupid thing I say 3 times. There you go. See, your life's a lot better than you thought it was. Coronavirus notwithstanding, things could be worse. All right. And I get to hear myself laugh at my own jokes. Twice. A little bit of color there, just for color here, not color in my verbal. Well, that was so much fun. I want to do a little bit more. Okay, since I did her, let's do a little bit of him. They're both quite reddish, but Wright told me it's because they were at the beach, or they had just been at the beach, one or the other. So they all had hefty suntan-ish faces. There. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bid you a fond adieu, and I do mean that. Which part? The fond or the adieu? Both! I wish you a fond adieu. I'm going to wish you fondue. And say, see ya mañana, probably. If I find myself doing something really exciting tonight, I will broadcast again, but don't hold your breath. I'm going to keep painting for a while. So the trick is, I'm going to leave this and go back to this, and then go from that to my friend Wright sitting on his Jeep, right? For those of you who missed that. And I'll work on this for a while, because now I've looked at this for so long that it's cleared my brain, so I can see this with fresh eyes. And then after a couple hours or an hour, I'll come back to this one and I'll see it with fresh eyes. And my response is usually, egads, what was I thinking? Because I'm seeing all my mistakes that I'm not seeing right now. Get it? So it turns out, if you want to know a really good trick, I don't think I'm unusual in this regard. I just am unusual because I've discovered it. You can actually do several portraits at one time. Better, considerably better than doing one at a time. Whew. Well, it's been fun. Let me see if there's any other. Yeah, people are emailing me. Radine, if you want me to do a portrait, just send me an email. Yep, about 20 minutes. That sounds about right. Thank you, Scott. Fondue to you as well. All right, y'all. Love you. Stay healthy. Stay well. Stay home. I'll be back soon. Oh, bye-bye.